Year 1882. Location: the North Atlantic, west of the Azores. A research vessel drifts above nearly 3,000 meters of dark water. A steel cable descends into the Atlantic, carrying a dredging basket toward the unseen seafloor. Minutes pass, then the cable tightens. When the crate reaches the deck, the crew empties its contents onto a wooden table. Mud, coral, broken rock, and several fragments of dark basalt. Flat edges, smooth surfaces. One sailor measures the largest piece with a brass ruler, 37 centimeters across. The fragments receive inventory numbers and are sealed inside a wooden crate destined for a museum archive. A photograph is taken. Just stones. Just measurements. But the note in the record reads, "Unusual geometry." Because if those fragments were shaped by human hands, thousands of meters beneath the Atlantic, the implication would be extraordinary. A structure beneath the sea, a place some ancient writers once described as Atlantis. And if that were true, it would change everything. The map of Atlantis begins long before that crate reached the archive. It begins in Athens, around 360 BCE. The philosopher Plato writes two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Verified evidence shows these texts survive in the historical record and describe a powerful island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The narrow gateway, now called the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato describes an immense island kingdom. Ring-shaped canals surrounding a central city. Harbors carved into stone. Walls plated with shining metals. Then the disaster arrives. Earthquakes, flood, and in a single day and night, the island disappears beneath the sea. But inside the archive of ancient literature, a contradiction appears immediately. Plato is the only writer of his era to describe Atlantis in such detail. No earlier document confirms it. The record begins with silence. Centuries pass before explorers begin searching the Atlantic for clues. In the late 19th century, oceanographers lowered dredging equipment into deep water to map the ocean floor. Steel baskets scrape sediment and return to the surface, filled with rock and coral. Sometimes the crate holds fragments that look unusual. Flat surfaces, straight edges. Contemporary reports claimed some dredged stones resembled pieces of masonry. Photographs show the fragments arranged beside measuring rods on ship decks. Some pieces approach 40 centimeters wide. But the evidence fractures here. Deep-sea dredging mixes layers of sediment from different geological periods. A single fragment cannot confirm a structure. It can only raise suspicion. Still, the stones receive inventory numbers. The crate enters the archive, and the question remains in the record. Nearly a century later, the investigation moves to shallow water. In 1968, divers near Bimini Island in the Bahamas photograph something unusual beneath 3 meters of sea. Large limestone blocks stretch across the seabed in a line nearly 800 meters long. The photograph spreads quickly. To some observers, it looks unmistakable, a road beneath the ocean. A legend says the formation marks part of the harbor of Atlantis. At first glance, the alignment appears deliberate, but the contradiction emerges when geologists study the stones. Verified evidence shows the blocks consist of beach rock, limestone created when sand and shell fragments cement together along ancient shorelines. Over time, erosion fractures the rock into rectangular slabs. Storm currents shift those slabs into lines. From above, the pattern resembles construction. The photograph feels mysterious. The geology tells another story. Inside the archive, historians begin tracing every reference to Atlantis through ancient manuscripts and historical maps. One pattern becomes clear. No confirmed artifact has ever been catalogued as Atlantean. No inscriptions, no tools, no pottery. The bones of a civilization are missing, and archaeology rarely leaves a civilization without bones. Yet the archive contains another complication. A missing file, Dive logs mentioned in early newspaper reports from the Bimini discovery cannot be fully located today. Only partial records remain. The silence invites speculation. One theory alleges evidence disappeared, but the evidence fractures here. Archives lose documents constantly. Floods destroy records. Boxes are misfiled. Photographs fade. Sometimes the missing file is simply the result of time, but Atlantis does not exist only in Greek texts. Across the world, cultures preserve similar stories. Flood myths, sunken lands, cities swallowed by rising seas. In India, ancient traditions describe the submerged city of Dwarka. In Japan, divers explore strange rock formations near Yonaguni Island. In the Mediterranean, Bronze Age settlements now lie beneath modern coastlines. A legend says entire civilizations vanished beneath expanding oceans. The parallels feel striking. Stories from distant cultures echo the same disaster. But patterns feel intentional. But patterns aren't proof. Anthropologists studying the records suggest another explanation. Some flood myths may preserve distant memories of real environmental change. Events that reshaped coastlines thousands of years ago. Around 12,000 years ago, the last ice age began to end. Massive glaciers covering northern continents started melting. Verified evidence shows global sea levels rose more than 100 meters during this transition. That is roughly the height of a 30-story building. Coastlines shifted inland. River valleys flooded. Low plains disappeared beneath advancing oceans. If early human communities lived along those ancient coasts, their settlements would now lie underwater. Not because continents suddenly sank, but because the sea slowly moved inland. The map begins to change. Atlantis may not describe one lost island. It may echo many vanished shorelines. Still, Plato's description remains unusually detailed. Circular canals, geometric harbors, massive defensive walls. Why invent such precision? One hypothesis suggests Atlantis was never meant as literal geography. Instead, it functioned as philosophical narrative. In Plato's story, Atlantis becomes a powerful empire that grows arrogant. Its discipline fades, its ambition expands. Eventually, catastrophe follows. The island sinks. Athens, in the narrative, survives. The contrast feels deliberate, a warning disguised as history, but the record goes cold. Plato never confirms whether the story came from real sources or literary imagination. The contradiction remains preserved in the archive. Meanwhile, oceanographers continue mapping the Atlantic basin. Their measurements reveal something critical. The Atlantic seafloor consists primarily of oceanic crust. Verified evidence shows oceanic crust forms along mid-ocean ridges through plate tectonics. This type of crust behaves differently from continental land. Large continents do not suddenly sink into ocean basins. They break apart slowly over millions of years, which means a massive island civilization collapsing overnight in the middle of the Atlantic is extremely unlikely. But smaller land masses can disappear. Volcanic islands collapse. Earthquakes trigger underwater landslides. Sea levels rise. Coastal settlements vanish beneath sediment and seawater. Those events are real, and archaeologists have discovered submerged ruins in several parts of the world. Just not where Atlantis was supposed to be. So what happened to Atlantis? The answer exists in three parts. What we know, verified evidence shows Atlantis originates in Plato's writings from the 4th century BCE. No confirmed archaeological site matching his description has ever been discovered. What remains plausible? One hypothesis suggests the story reflects distant memories of coastal settlements lost when sea levels rose after the last ice age. What is likely myth? A vast, advanced civilization in the middle of the Atlantic that suddenly sank beneath the ocean. Geology, archaeology, and ocean mapping all contradict that scenario. And yet, the legend refuses to disappear. Because somewhere between the photograph, the crate, and the archive, the human mind keeps searching for patterns. A fragment with inventory numbers, a stone beneath the sea, a missing file in the record. Each clue feels like the edge of a larger map. But when the investigation reaches the end of the archive, the silence remains.